Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the C-Town Podcast, where Seattle business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders are invited on to share their stories with us. I'm your host, Christian Harris. This week's episode of the C-Town Podcast is brought to you by C-Town Real Estate. Their mission to make a difference extends beyond just their unique and unconventional approach with their clients and their agents. They partner with the community to give back a percentage of the proceeds from each home sale to a local nonprofit of their client's choice. Visit ctown.com, sea-town.com, and experience the difference with C-Town Real Estate today. Welcome back to another episode of the C-Town Podcast. This is episode 64. Today I'm joined by Holli Margell, the owner of Native Light Photography. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank
Holli,
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So you're connected by a mutual friend of ours that I know through the West Seattle Chamber. So you own a photography business. Maybe tell us a little bit more about, kind of what you specialize in. Obviously there's a lot of photographers out there. What kind of makes you stand out with?
Yeah, so I have a background in weddings and families, and I decided to choose a niche that I thought was being underserved, and that is the niche of the small local business owner. So I call myself a business photographer. Okay. And what that looks like in practical terms are the photos that people might use in their LinkedIn bio, their About Me page for their website, and then their website photos, So if you're, for example, a chiropractor, you might want to have your headshot on there as well as some action shots of you working with some of your ideal clients. You might want to show that you work with kids or you specialize in working with people who are elderly. Okay. So photos that show kind of what you do and also maybe what you make. I've worked with a lot of artists as well.
Okay. Now, when you started Native Light Photography in 2015, right?
Yes.
Was that your initial niche, or did it kind of develop into that over time?
That's kind of a long story.
Okay.
We can go ahead and I'll just lay it all out there, and you might have some follow-up questions for that. So I have been into photography forever. I always considered photography to be my side hustle or my side business. I also worked in a lot of small businesses as like a general office manager, working, scheduling, updating websites with a couple of, Word text updates or adding photos. Sure. I didn't decide to focus on this niche business until I had a really big event happen where it kind of rocked my world and made me go, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. Right? So that happened when my aunt, who is my mom's younger sister, died. She passed away. She was 53 when she died. So she was really young. Yeah. She was someone I looked up to growing up and kind of emulated a little bit in kind of how I wanted to be a parent. And when she died, I realized, reflecting on her life, she kind of always lived for her family first and not what her ambitions were. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until she was diagnosed with cancer that she really started doing the things she wanted to do. So what I want to be doing, photography as a side hobby business with 2 children and doing more kind of standard business work for other people, I thought, well, what do I really want? I really want to be a photographer that earns a living. Sure. Being a photographer. Yeah. And so I read a lot of marketing books. I've always been interested in that side of business anyway. And I started doing some research. I thought, okay, what did I find? So many wedding photographers, so many family photographers. I personally know at least 5. Sure. And so I thought I need to be very specific and serve a different market. So that's why I chose business owners and small business community. I have a real passion for that. So that's where Native Light Photography got started. Okay. But kind of a very circuitous route to get there.
That's a big word. Well, that's interesting because I obviously know a lot of business owners and photographers, and I think you're the first that's like, this is my, a friend or a guy who does, photography on the side or something. It's not right. Like someone who does business photography or headshots or whatever, Mm-hmm. Or maybe they'll do like headshots and because they do family photos or something.
Right, right. It's a real, we're a very talented city. Yeah. We have a ton of talent, and it's really easy to fit things in. And I've done enough reading and enough observing of entrepreneurs around the Seattle area to know that if you really want to do something well, if you pick a lane or pick a focus you can only get better at that thing over time. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to pick a category, I want to pick something that I think is underserved. And since I've started, I've actually met 2 other business-focused photographers since, and it's pretty exciting to be like, oh, I did pick something cool, and that's, it's starting to catch on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm seeing a little more competition pop up.
Sure.
And it actually makes me excited.
Yeah. I mean, is whether or not it was intentional or not, it was pretty smart to kind of do your research ahead of time, because I think most people don't do that. They're just kind of like, I want to do this thing, and they have no idea if it's a saturated market already, if there's actually a niche, if there's, a market for it. So it's good on you. Good job.
Thanks.
I'm glad it's working out.
Yeah.
When you started your business, what did you find to be the most surprising or unexpected aspect of starting your own business?
The fact that people don't really understand the differences between like what a headshot is and what maybe just a casual, walk in the park with their family photo is, and how powerful being intentional with those, understanding what those are, can do to leverage you as a business owner. I think certain kinds of businesses can get away with using their family photos that they get every year, in their business, but the power and the impression you have when you've taken the time and care to do a professional headshot and professional photos for your business, it just kind of levels you up, just like, the quality of your logo. So I've been surprised at how much education I've needed to add value to my work, to kind of like prove it before they hire me. Sure. It's been surprising.
Sure. Do companies ever hire you to do like all of their employees' headshots, or like an industry that would do that, like real estate, for example, where headshots are a big thing?
Yes. I just wrapped up one, and it's a really interesting workflow. So there's a couple of smaller, I would say medium-sized businesses in the area who've hired me to come in and do all their staff headshots. Okay. And the challenging piece for that is scheduling. So I might show up and set up in a conference room 3 different times during the month, just because you've got different events going on, especially if they're doing something like installations, like actual furnishings into places.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I was just thinking about that because the other day I was doing some online research in my old brokerage. Okay. And I was looking at what agents are still there, who's moved on, and like they all have headshots with them, right? Mm-hmm. So you got everything from the it was probably taken 30 years ago, on a boat on an old flip phone, to suit and tie and some generic background or whatever. But it's just kind of interesting because I'm a big fan of kind of congruency and consistency and that sort of thing, and so I know there's other brokerages are like, this is the background, this is we'll do your headshot for you, as opposed to, well, you just put whatever you want out there.
Yeah. So I've heard a couple different things. I'm curious to ask you a question. So what is your impression of those who have the flip phone photo versus the suit and tie polished photo? Me personally, like my style, I'm much more laid back. So I'm kind of an anti-headshot guy. Mm-hmm. But typically, you want to have a photo of you somewhere, and you always want to use the same photo. So, but I'm much more of I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy. So that's what my photo's going to be. I'm not going to dress up in a 3-piece suit and pretend to be super fancy when I'm not. So I don't know. It kind of depends. I mean, some people gravitate towards the you got to put on the professional persona, and that's how you appear to people. But I'm much more be authentic. You'll draw people who gravitate towards that, as opposed to you have to pretend to be someone you're not. Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that I encourage people to do when I am hired to do a headshot is, they ask what to wear. Especially if you're a landscape business owner, you do not wear a suit and tie. Sure. And the reason for that is you want to show up how you show up for your clients. Yeah. So if you're looking very different in your headshot than how you actually show up to meet them, that's a big no-no. Sure. Because you want to create that authenticity and that connection. Exactly. What I found is there's certain companies that are maybe more of a national chain where they do have that cookie cutter criteria, one sheet for the photographer. Mm-hmm. You have to have these color backgrounds. You need to crop X number of inches around their head. And I can do that. I have a lot more fun though when I'm working with a small company that maybe they have 12 employees and they have a vision and they want to do some kind of fun vintage sepia tone series, and no one's using their right or left side of their face looking the same direction.
Yeah.
So I definitely gravitate more towards the creative. But I think that's the nature of the smaller local businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. If there wasn't, if the large corporation or franchise fit everybody, you wouldn't have all these independent places popping up that allow more freedom and expression, of their agents. So.
Absolutely.
Yep. What do you love most about what you do in your business?
Discovering different types of businesses.
Okay.
I really enjoy hearing about people's origin stories. I'm sure you've found that in this podcast series.
The whole purpose of this,
when I'm working with these business owners, they're doing something different for a reason, and being around them and talking about how we're going to show what they do and what makes them special. It's a really exciting energy because it kind of, they're speaking their truth and they're speaking to why they started, and it's incredibly inspiring.
Okay. What's been you can pick whatever. If there are a few things out there.
Okay.
What's been either like the most inspiring story or the most interesting photo shoot or most interesting business that you've worked with?
Oh man, those are really good questions. Let me see if I can. I'll pick one and then go with that. Most inspiring. It's so hard because everybody has a good story. Okay, so one that jumps out at me is someone who works doing something called being a death doula. Have you heard of that?
No. I mean, the only thing I can think of is like aquamation, with pets, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. So let me explain it a little bit. I didn't know it existed, but it makes a lot of sense. And maybe part of why I am so inspired by it is because I've lived through the loss of some people very close to me, and I've had to be there in the thick of it. And so you've heard of a birth doula, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So a birth doula usually comes in either during your pregnancy or right after a pregnancy to help you out through the process. It can be as simple as holding your hand there in the hospital while you're giving birth, or more practical, like showing up, cooking your meals, and sweeping your house.
Sure. My wife had one when we had our kids. So
right.
Very helpful.
So a death doula is very similar. It is someone who comes in, and I'm sure there's different levels of service. It's something that's new that I've seen popping up more than once here in Seattle. And it's someone to literally come in and help you through the process. It might be the practical end of coming in and sitting down with your family and helping you plan for your funeral, like if you have a terminal illness, walking you through preparing for what that's going to look like, maybe helping you transition to hospice care at the end of your life. But it's really supporting you through that life transition. And it makes a lot of sense to me, because if we're going to support birth, why not support death too?
We can't talk about death. That's uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. Yes. So I was really inspired to work with a woman who does death doula work.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to, offline, we'll have to talk more about what businesses that have these interesting stories that would be worth having on as guests. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure the community would love to hear more of those kind of stories. So.
Yeah.
What's in your line of work, photography? What would you consider like your greatest strength to be?
Being able to get people comfortable in front of the camera.
Okay. Do you find people regularly like kind of freeze up and get a little
absolutely
stony in front of the camera? Okay.
Yes. And I'm no exception.
Sure.
When somebody's taking my picture, I get very nervous.
Yeah.
So what I learned really early on in my trajectory was that my specialty is being able to make people feel comfortable. Usually it comes down to having a conversation and treating them like a human being and less like a job.
Sure.
And once you have a conversation, people automatically relax. And that's something that so my favorite story to explain this is I was 18 years old and I was a wedding photographer's assistant. And at that time, we were using medium format cameras, and my job was to load film and schlep equipment. Okay. And I worked with a woman who was a very talented photographer, but her people skills were a little lacking. So if you had a bride that was having trouble, she was not very good at talking to them, but she would send me to go get them.
Yeah.
And we had a bride who would not come out of the bathroom. And we asked a bridesmaid to go in and bring her out. Oh no, she can't come out now. And soon enough, we were down to the wire before the wedding and we needed a group shot. So my boss sent me in the bathroom and I went in to find this wonderfully trembling, beautiful bride having a hard time because she had never worn makeup before. And she's trying to put on makeup.
Oh, wow.
And everybody was kind of irritated and exasperated with her, but she was, at the height of emotion. Sure. And I asked her, why are you putting makeup on if you've never worn it before? Why are you doing this right now? Yeah. And she said, well, the photographer said that I had to wear lipstick and I had to wear mascara and I had to do this. And I was like, whoa. Okay. So let's back up a little bit. So the reason why she encouraged you to do that was because you're very fair, and in order to show up in the photographs better, you need a little bit of color. But you know what? If you've never done it before, let's not worry about it, because this is who you are. Yep. And so I kind of talked her off that ledge of being frozen to be camera ready, and she calmed right down. I did help her put on a little bit of lip liner and gloss, and I helped walk her through putting on mascara just on her top lashes, so because she was so fair, she had like no non-existent eyelashes, right? So walked her through that, and that's kind of that moment where I realized, okay, I'm really good at talking with people and putting them at ease. And then, of course, the rest of that wedding went really well. But that's carried me through a lot of situations, no matter what kind of photography I've done. And it especially is helpful with businesses because, as a business owner, you're really busy. You don't have a lot of time. We're not going to spend all day with a photo shoot. Sure. We're going to spend an hour, maybe 2 hours. Right. And I got to get you to look normal and pleasant and not stiff and shy.
Right.
So, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I'd imagine it would be a pretty essential skill for any photographer working with people to have that skill set, but I mean, maybe not. Seems like it would make a much better outcome.
It would, yeah.
I mean, normally I'd ask if money wasn't an issue, what would you do? But it seems like you kind of had a early epiphany and have shifted to doing what you love, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That wasn't really a question, sorry.
No, that's all right. You're reviewing your questions. That's great.
What would you say you're passionate about?
I am passionate about community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elaborate. What about community?
Okay. I believe that we are healthier as people and as a country when we come together in community. How that shows up for me is in a variety of ways. So in the past, I've always been one to volunteer, whether it's in high school for a club or a group, to as a grown adult and being part of the neighborhood council, as well as at a certain point in time, I was part of a pea patch, which is kind of like a loose gardening group. Sure. You get your own spot that you pay the city for a year.
Was that one of the ones here in West Seattle?
Yeah, I was part of the Delridge Pea Patch for about 3 or 4 years. Okay. And then, kids and business, and I just didn't have time, and I didn't want to hold on to some land I wasn't going to take good care of. But I learned a lot. So you learn a lot in community. You're also able to accomplish a lot in community. Right now, to this day, it means my kids' PTSA. Right? And then more loosely, I've worked at connecting with other photographers. First of all, because I like to pass business along that might not be a good fit for me. And also I think that we grow together rather than in isolation.
Sure. So you live here in West Seattle.
I do.
What would you say that you love most about West Seattle?
Well, it's going to sound funny, but I'm going to say community.
Okay.
The thing that kept me coming back to West Seattle after spending some time away is, I love seeing people I know when I'm out and about. Yep. Some people, that's not appealing. They want to be anonymous. I feel better being in a space where people know me. They know my kids. Mm-hmm. They know about us because I feel like we can care about each other more. West Seattle feels very much like a small town. And I grew up here. I have a lot of relatives who still live here. I have aunts and uncles and, first cousins and second cousins. So I feel a sense of loyalty, but also it's really comforting to know no matter how much West Seattle has grown and changed, people know me and they know my family, and that's very comforting.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. I think it's part of human nature. Like, we want to be known, we're very, very tribal, and that can go good or go bad.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Imagine this.
Okay.
You've got your best friend in from out of town, never been to Seattle. What do you go with them? What do you tell them what to do?
Okay, so it depends on the friend and what their interests are.
Sure.
So, for example, I had a friend who's an author, a self-published author. She's sold, I think, 3 or 4 books through Amazon now. She's from Canada, and she came to visit. And so the first thing we did was go to the Central Library downtown, which we could have spent all day in.
Sure.
It's a beautiful space in and of itself, but of course she loved looking through the different levels of books and things. And then, of course, Pike Place Market for coffee, and then a pickle on a stick because we both love pickles.
Sure.
And then other bookstores, they're kind of dwindling, but there's some really cool...
Third Place.
Third Place. There's Elliott Bay Books. There's really just some really cool little tiny used type places in the market as well. Just some nooks and crannies. And then, if they're really into art, we're going to try to hit an art walk, no matter... depending on when they're visiting, where that's happening. Sure. Seattle is rich in artists, and there's an art walk pretty much every single week, depending on where you are in the city.
Okay. So let's go into the lightning round here. So we'll do quick questions, quick answers.
Okay.
Just kind of blow through them.
Cool.
All right. In the past, what was holding you back from becoming the entrepreneur you are today?
Fear.
Okay. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Keep moving forward.
What is a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Lists. I make a list every day. I make a list for the week, and I make a list for the month.
Love it. That's good. Do you listen to podcasts?
I do.
What's your favorite one and why?
So you're going to laugh, but I love Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Why would I laugh? It's great.
Because that's what your reference for this. So I've been listening to his podcast for a long time. Second runner-up is going to be Chase Jarvis Creative Live. He doesn't consistently do podcasts. He's done different iterations of types of interviews for creative individuals. Okay. So I love following his. He does have a podcast, but he also does these little video YouTube series of very similar format to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Gattaca.
Okay. A little bit of a sci-fi person, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little less sci-fi, a little more fascinated by how we are evolving as people and the role that science plays in that.
Okay. Interesting. If you could recommend just one book to our listeners, what would it be?
It would be The Art of Nonconformity by a man by the name of Chris Guillebeau. And that book was super inspiring. The premise is you get to decide how you engineer your life. And he has a wonderful series of examples of people who do just that.
What is next for your business? Where are you going?
Yeah. So I think the next big step, so like I said, I do lists. So I did a 5-year, a 10-year, and a 20-year plan. Okay. I'm really getting close to the 5-year mark, and that'll be next year. So the next big thing for me is going to be an open studio. And what I mean by open is I want to have it as a resource for my own business, but I would also like to share it as a space to other photographers that need a studio that they can use. Okay. If I'm not using it, I'd also really like to teach out of there and not be tied to finding locations to rent to teach.
Sure. Sounds very communal. I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah.
So as we close up here, can you share one piece of parting guidance or words of wisdom to our audience?
Yes. Okay, so my advice at this point in my life experience would be to go for the things they want to do and don't wait until things are perfect to do them.
That's good. So what's the best way that our listeners can get in touch with you if they need a business photographer or headshots or are just fascinated by or just want to meet for coffee?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. My website is nativelightphoto.com. All exactly how it sounds, and it should be spelled in the English language. Okay. And then from there, they can fill out my contact form, and that sends an email to me. They can email me. I'm Holli, HOLLI, at nativelightphoto.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Holli. Yeah. I hope that our listeners have found this interesting, and we'll give you a call or check out your website for Native Light Photography.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
All right.
That wraps up this week's episode. Make sure to check out our guest website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they are doing. If you have any questions, know someone who should be a guest on here, or has a great story worth sharing, email me at christianharris@seatown.com. That's sea-town.com. I would also love it if you would go to iTunes and give us a review and a nice 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on great guests and provide exceptional content, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rank well in iTunes so others can find and enjoy the show. You can also find out more about me, how my real estate brokerage is breaking the mold and making a difference in our Seattle communities, and other projects I'm working on by visiting seatown.com, sea-town.com. Thanks for listening. The music for our podcast is courtesy of The Fascination Movement. You can find their albums in the iTunes Store. You can also listen to more episodes and find all our show notes on our website at seatownpodcast.com. This has been a Seatown Media production.